What is up, you dirt bags? My name is Luke Egerbrotten, your host of the Dirt Bags podcast. We have a ginormous episode today. A lot of different things coming your way, and we are so excited to introduce our very first guest host. You guys know who he is. He's a recurring dirtbag. We've had many episodes with him. The septic expert, Mr. James Stiksma, Canadian Septic. How we doing, man?
Good, Luke. Thanks for asking me to come out. Appreciate the opportunity to try and learn how to podcast a little here.
Yeah, so obviously we talked about this on a couple episodes ago, with Luke transitioning out and just, what was the podcast going to look like? I've never been this excited for the next chapter of the Dirtbags. And we've had a lot of chapters, of course, through the years, but what I envision this to be is other experts coming in and helping me as a guest host. And so for this episode, we've got a surprise guest coming up here, but it's you being, in the industry. I think that really helps me because it kind of gives the two sides of the coin there. But very excited to have you in as a guest host and hopefully just continue rolling with other guest hosts and really kind of reshape what the Dirtbags looks like.
Well, I'm excited to be a part of it at the early parts here and see how you go moving forward with some of the other guest hosts.
Yeah, heck yeah. And so for anyone listening, James, I think we've done two episodes now, two or
Yep.
three, right?
Yep, we've done two. Yep.
Yeah. And so if you haven't listened to them yet, I would listen to those before you finish this episode, because it helps you get to know James a bit more, his backstory as we lead into this episode, because this episode, I think is perfect for what we're looking to talk about, because James, your experience matches up so well with our guest. And I can't sit here and blab too much more because I'm so excited to introduce Mr. Walnut Grove Excavating, Travis Gemmell, to the show, and Mr. June 2024 on the On-Site Installer magazine. Travis, welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the Dirtbags.
What an intro. Travis, you're going to sign this for me later, right?
Yes, I will.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Man, that is awesome. Travis, we've talked about you a lot on the show, I feel like, through the years, and a lot of people know you through Instagram. People know who you are. They've seen you at shows, but I think it was just so fitting to get you on the Dirtbag. So thank you for being here today. And I know James and I were going through questions, and we're just so excited to dive into not only like your past history, because that's probably one of the most fascinating things is how you got into it, but also kind of where your company is at today. And so as we jump in here, if you can give us a quick snapshot today, what is Walnut Grove Excavating? What's your crew look like? Leadership team, kind of how are you guys structured?
Yeah, this year was kind of an interesting one because the company I came from, it was always about to be a successful company, you doubled your growth every year. That was kind of their mindset. So we grew every year for about 6 years. And then in the 7th year, we did really well. And again, our quality was there. It wasn't to my level of quality. So we had 2 crews going. And then it just wasn't feeling right. Things weren't, I think, as dialed in as what I wanted to be. So we actually, we lost 1 full crew this spring. We just decided there was a bunch of things that kind of happened, and we got back to just 1 crew. So we have 3 guys out in the field. I have 1 mechanic that also helps anything we need. So he helps kind of run the landscape yard. He does all of our maintenance, and then he, as a CDL, he'll jump in any truck, go help us whenever we need. Len is my father-in-law. He does all of my estimates, and Lisa is my office manager. She does all of the phone calls, misdigs. She's the one that answers the phone every single time. So she's very critical. Then my wife works 1 day a week doing all the accounts payable and receivable.
So, and I wrote that down because I really wanted to touch on this. I didn't know how soon it would come up in the podcast, but I wrote down scale up and scale back. And so I'm very curious because most of us think that success is tied to revenue growth. You got to make top line revenue. You got to keep growing. You got to keep doubling every single year. And hopefully there's profit left over. And I'm curious to hear your side of it and I was talking to a few other contractors in the industry as well, and they want to hear a little bit more of how did you scale back a little bit, and also why did you scale back?
It's I'll say it's a little humbling experience because the short story was when I worked at the large scale company, I really loved the leadership. I read books nonstop. We did podcasts nonstop, like just listen to podcasts. We did book studies with hundreds of drivers. I mean, we did a lot of leadership stuff. And I was always pushing leadership. I was always pushing classes. I was pushing everything. I wanted to have really good people working for me, awesome, amazing leaders that were trickling down and building great people all the way up. So, and I'd say I got the way things transpired, I'm glad I left, but the leadership piece changed so much there that I watched one of the best companies, I think, in the world, as in leadership, servant leadership, become literally the worst run leadership company I've ever seen. And I saw a lot of people get hurt in that. And then really when I left, I was like, I want to get away from some of that drama, some of the politics, and just go do some stuff by myself for a while. Then that was all right. But then when you start adding people, I love people. Yeah. So then there was also that part where it's like, it'd be fun to have good people in here, take care of them like I used to, have that network, and again, build a company together, not just me. And it was actually kind of a slap in the face a little bit we talked leadership. I built a culture, but I didn't really push it. I did it with just kind of normal day-to-day interaction, but I didn't deliberately talk about it. And I hired a guy, and I'll give Josh a lot of credit for this because he came in, he watched me on Instagram for a while. He worked for another excavator. He really liked what this company was about. And then he came in and he kept kind of saying, well, what's your standards on this? And I used to build standard practices for a company, operating procedures. And I got so burnt out of that. I was so tired of it because it was more just do what's right, do what the quality is supposed to be. But then there's also this part where if they don't know what the quality is supposed to be. So that was kind of this whole aspect. When I lost a crew, it was like, I got to kind of step back and look at myself, because some of these things we're doing really, really well, but there's also this part that I'm missing. So this year I went back to the same crew and said, I'm not sure if I really want to grow a lot, but I want to get all three of you guys dialed in. So it is 100% streamlined. You understand the expectations 100%. And he did a good job of kind of calling that out. So we're doing a book study every week. Extreme Ownership's the one we're doing now. But we're talking about podcasts. We're diving into a lot of that stuff. We're diving into the accountability. We did really well on the work, but I'm the full circle thing. So like, it's great that you do a good job on the job, but if the truck comes back looking destroyed, that's not success. If you're not taking care of stuff when you get back, that's not success. If people aren't raving about how well you did, if they're just happy with how well you did, that's not success. So he kind of helped me, which was funny because I was always the young entrepreneur at the business, like, we got to teach leadership, we got to do this. And then it was like, all of a sudden I was the burnout old manager that he's like calling me out saying, we need to do more leadership, and we need to, like, oh my gosh, how roles have kind of reversed a little bit. So that's kind of the point with restructuring this year, was kind of getting back to the roots of getting everything growing the right way and taking off the right way, and kind of doing a refresh. And then with the profit piece too, and this is a hard part for me, I mean, just speaking honestly, is, at first it's like, I want to grow, but then there's also this part where it's like, it's not that much fun. Like, there's just that much more stress. There's that many more jobs you got to do. There's that many more that much more equipment you got to buy.
Yeah.
So like back in the day, I'm only saying 4 years ago, like before COVID, you could buy stuff that was relatively inexpensive. But now
Yeah.
if you buy a new piece of equipment, I mean, they're 20-30% more than what they were 4 years ago. And I mean, there's guys, I bought the quad axle for 205,000 right before COVID. And, that same truck's like 330. So it's
Yeah.
just, you start doing the math on that. And you're like, how does a guy that's buying a new truck at 330 justify the $150 an hour that a 200? And I have the same thing. I'm sure the older guys that have the triaxle that's been paid for 30 years
Yeah.
looks at my quad axle and says, how in the world does he justify paying $205,000? But there's also the part in this business of, if you're newer, it's almost better to have new equipment because you don't have any maintenance on it, or it's covered. You got to have, when you're new and you have limited resources, limited people, your equipment just has to run.
Well, that's sort of the mindset that we had. We operated for our first 5-6 years without any of our own equipment. We would just sub out the earthworks, and I'm not the most mechanically inclined guy. I didn't go take shop class or anything like that in high school, so I'm not the guy that's going to be in there, twisting wrenches and trying to get things fixed. So that's one of the main reasons when we started looking at equipment, that and the 0% financing, that we decided to go with newer equipment, just because there is more to than just the payment. Obviously, older equipment's going to require more maintenance, more repairs, and you're also going to run into the problem of running out, or not having. You're losing out on time to actually complete work, and you're losing out on revenue because your equipment's down. So that's time that you can't get back. And so it's always one of those questions that I know a lot of guys are always trying to figure out. Do you go new? Do you go used? And there is no one answer.
No, there's not.
To give anyone.
No, there's not. Yeah.
So and I know you've got some used equipment as well. Like you had the slinger. I don't know if you still have the slinger or not,
Yeah.
and some other used equipment. But you think your Volvo was new when you got the 80?
No, I was
Or
almost. I mean, it was
almost?
just, I was a couple years old, had
Yeah,
1,000 hours on it or something. But
yeah.
yeah,
So
it's kind of trying to find the right deal, but then also something that's new enough. And then like the cat we just bought, the 310, that's brand new. The
yeah,
quad was brand new. The Kubotas, the skid steers I always buy brand new. Um, so yeah, your normal, I mean, equipment that you're using every day, I recommend new, especially, if you're doing the 0% or something. But I mean, there's also the catch, like if you're buying used, you might have a higher interest rate, and then you're almost closer to what you're going to be with buying new. So, the other thing is, I'm not a gambling guy, but I mean, this whole business deal is a gamble. But I mean,
Yeah.
yep,
you also have to, if you have a equipment payment, you will find work, and you're going to
right.
go get work because you have that payment. So I don't say that's a great thing, but sometimes it is. It's a good motivator.
Yeah, I know one of the biggest things I had to overcome when we went and bit the bullet on buying equipment was just the idea of, like, worst case scenario, this doesn't work. I can still sell this piece of equipment, and yes, I'm going to take a hit on it, but hopefully I've at least made that loss back in revenue and profit from the time that I did have it. So once I went from it's $130,000 risk to, well, it's probably 20 to 30. It's like, okay, well, it becomes a little bit more palatable at that point.
Yeah, and James, that's a good point. It's like, what's your delta after, if everything went to shit, if you had to sell it, what's the loss there? And it's not so much the entire cost of the machine. It's the same thing with buying a truck or a new vehicle. But it's funny how I would actually push back on Travis, what you just said there, because I also don't think that everyone is created equal, because there are some people, they'll buy the stuff and they'll say, all right, when does the phone start ringing? Or they'll just assume that,
Yeah.
assume that
Yeah.
it comes to them. And it's like, no, none of this is easy. And you talk about this all the time, but you have to go into business knowing that almost every day something's going to go wrong. And
Yeah.
I think it's not a pessimistic view. It's just understanding that it doesn't make it a bad day when something does go wrong. And so I think knowing that when you go into business is that this is going to be hard, and there's usually not a pot of gold in your first year that you get, paid back. So it's super important to just understand the work that goes into it. But like you said, I mean, if you have that payment and you have that entrepreneurial willpower, like you will make it happen.
Yeah, and I think the part I've always wanted to have a good discussion about with other guys, so maybe at the wet show or something, but when people say rent, I I hate renting. Renting is like, and some people do it. And again, if you're not really sure this is the field you're going to be in,
Yeah.
might be a good thing to do for a while. But I just, you know, part of my one of the departments I would run, we had 40-50 million dollar budget. So you would have to plan that every year, and you'd have to hit within a certain percentage for your bonus and all this kind of fun stuff. But the ROIs, you would have to perform those all the time. So every time you wanted to justify something, or I want to go get this, you'd have to prove that to the president and whoever else. And you'd have to put a good case together. And man, when you just look at like renting a dozer, who was just on Anderson, I think they were
Yep.
talking about a truck, but I mean, he had a really good point on, you really need two trucks, because if your one truck's down, you're really out of luck, because people don't care that your truck's broke for 2 weeks. You've got to have a backup on some of that stuff.
Right.
But and a pump truck's very specialized. So if you have a specialized piece of equipment, you have to have, that's where I would say you really need new. If it's more of a backup piece, then you can rent it easy. That's not so important about being new, because like you can rent a skid steer any day.
Sure.
You can rent a mini any day, but like pump trucks and that stuff, I think that's dead on. But I just struggle with, okay, I can go rent this excavator, or the dozer is a good example, because that was what made me buy a dozer. Was I had a job and I knew I could use it for about 2 weeks. Well, the rental was going to be almost like $4,000, I think, for the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you start doing the math and you're like, okay, well, if I lease this, my lease payment's $1,000. So if I lease that, I would pay rent for $4,000. But if I lease it, I've got 4 months of lease paid by just doing this job. So if I just find a couple more jobs I need this for, instead of paying that towards rent, I could eventually own it and then have it paid for. So that's kind of where, and thank God, because sometimes with those jobs, like that specific job that I was debating on renting or buying or whatever, another excavator told me, buy it, and you'll always have to work for it if you get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be careful of that. But
Yeah.
but he was right, because the thing on that job was it was supposed to be a sand job. It ended up being a clay job. Every time I'd go to start it, it would rain. So when I look at that job, it was supposed to be about a 1.5 to 2 week job. And it took me about 6.5 to 7 weeks, because I could only go work a couple days. And if I had to do a rental, I would have lost pretty badly on that, because I would either have to drive it back and forth to the rental place, or, eat the cost of a rental for 7 weeks compared to 2 weeks.
Right.
So rentals are always scared me a little bit in that sense, but.
And that's like for us, like I said earlier, the first 5 years we did a little bit different, because we got an extra employee with it. We weren't necessarily renting, but it was kind of renting, but with an operator as well. So that was sort of how we managed it. But exactly to your point, Travis, that's what the exercise I went through before committing to the machine was write down a list of all the jobs I did over the last 2 years. How many hours would it have taken for us to do it with a 6-ton size machine? And then start doing the math and figure out what that looks like versus, either hiring it out or renting it, and then going, okay, well, nope, case study right here tells me that I'm going to have the work for this, and just jump both feet into the deep end. So,
Yeah.
James, knowing what you know now, and if you were to go back a few years early, because obviously, like you said, you would just sub that out, would you purchase earlier? Or would you still, because also I say that because you're still learning the industry, because you're so new to it. So curious on that.
yeah, perhaps I would have a year or two earlier, knowing that. I think having other operators on site that had experience dealing with water table or dealing with whatever, gave us the confidence that, okay, we can do it ourselves. So even though, dirty little secret, I'm not an operator. I can run a machine a little, but I'm not an operator. We just hired it out. And so Arian wasn't either when he started, but he's got over, I think, 1,500 hours in the seat now. So, we're working our way towards that. And at some point, probably looking at a bigger machine so that jobs can get done quicker. But, got to go at a reasonable pace here. We've got enough payments between a track loader, a machine. We've got all the other trailers and everything else goes along with it. Can't do everything all at once because you can only be running 1 or 2 machines at a time with the size crew that we have. So
yeah. And when I started, just to be clear, like when I started, I didn't buy a dump truck right away. I had a pickup, a mini, and a skid steer and some attachments. So I subbed out all the dump truck work for about 1.5 years. And then that's again where you now have numbers to look at it and say, okay, I paid out 48,000 my first full year in trucking. And I'm like, well, 48,000. Well, if I go buy a $60,000 dump truck and I've got a $1,200 payment, okay, that's 15 grand, and I still have 30. But then I also don't have the waste. When you hire out a quad or a truck, you now, when you're doing a septic, you're like, well, I should need 30 ton of stone. Well, sometimes you need 38 ton of stone because whatever, so, but that truck's, they bring you the 30 ton, they leave, now they're subbed to somebody else, and then you're like, well, shoot, I need 8 more ton. Well, you might not be able to get it back until tomorrow, or you've got an abundance of stone, or they're not showing up when they're supposed to, or all those different things. So that was just one of those deals where you look at it and say, the hard thing for me, the dump truck is actually what about killed me a couple of times, because I bought a $55,000 quad axle from a chop shop in Tennessee. I thought it would be phenomenal. It looked great. It was painted up nice, but it was the worst piece of crap that you could imagine.
But it was the best one they had, right?
Yeah, best one. Yeah, best one. I said, please give me the best one. I'm not a mechanic. I don't have a mechanic. Give me a good one. And every time you'd get like 20 grand in the bank, something would break and it'd be 18 grand. And you're like, okay, great. So now I'm wiping out my savings again, or my checking. And then, now I don't have a truck to bring the material. So now I got to pay someone else. And oh, shoot, now I got a driver that's not driving. But so I'm also paying a truck. So, it was just one of those deals where the only thing you can do is just keep working. Yeah, you just got to keep moving. But
yeah, I think, and Travis, I really want to dive in. So people listening, or everyone listening, you were on the Sweat and Grime show a couple years back, and you give a wonderful synopsis of how, like, your previous job and then how you merged into the industry. So would love to hear a little bit more. I know you had about 20 plus years of experience in your job, and then I can see a lot of tendencies that carried over from your job to what you do now, even just like how the numbers, your budgeting, some of the decisions you make. But James, if that's cool with you, I would love to dive into Travis's backstory here, because then I would love to get into some of the first jobs that you did in this space, because people forget that no matter what, it was somebody's first time at some point, and to hear it from your perspective is a masterclass. So if we can dive in, like, what were you doing before Walnut Grove Excavating?
I was at a company for 20 years. I started as a truck driver, so I used to deliver food, so grocery, not like Uber, but like grocery to restaurants. So I started as a driver. I was there for about a year, became an assistant manager, which was then in charge of all the training for drivers. And then, got in a manager role, moved a couple times, moved to the manager role, and then moved to Detroit, and then moved down to South Carolina, then to Atlanta, and then started up some new type of facilities down there. All that went well, and then moved back to corporate. When I moved back to corporate, I started up, just fly out Monday, fly back Friday, but I'd help start up facilities from the transportation standpoint. It's called I was basically like a process manager. So I'd help.
Yeah.
We start up a Pittsburgh facility. I'd fly out there, help get leadership hired, get the drivers hired, get the equipment ordered, you had a 422 list checkpoint thing of this is how you did it. And we help, there's a whole group of people that help create it, but a process. So, but a lot of it was just dealing with customers, dealing with transportation, dealing with other departments. And, a lot of, I think of what we do, which people forget, is a lot of everything we do every day is marketing. So you're marketing yourself, you're marketing your company, you're marketing your department, you're marketing everything. So when I finished like Atlanta, that was where you had a $50 million budget. So you would say, okay, next year we're going to grow by 15%. If I grow by 15%, that means it's this many more cases per truck. If I do the average and all that, I need this many more trucks, which means I need to buy $3 million more of semi tractors and trailers, and these are the trailers we're going to need, and this is how many drivers we're going to need, and this is where we're going to place them by month, and then this is what it's going to calculate out. Here's my new budget for the next year. So thank God my finance guy that was down in Atlanta, he's a really good guy. He actually moved back to corporate about a year after I did, and he was in charge of all routing. And I got into this, and after about a year, I'm like, Tim, I need you, buddy. Can you come help build me a spreadsheet? Because he could build. I feel like, I swear to God, he was part of Excel, because
Yeah.
the way he could code stuff, I felt like he actually created Excel, but he came and created this sheet for me, and it helped me really dial in my numbers. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then about a year and a half later, I'm like, the sheet doesn't quite work for me anymore. Can you help me read? So he'd come out on a Saturday, and 8 hours in, we've got this sheet. And I've got it now where it's really cool. Again, it takes it by month, and it takes it by every single thing. So I can put in every person I have, their salary or what their hourly is, what their hours average out to. It calculates all their overtime, what every literal expense that you can think of. And then, like, the thing I like about it is fuel. It can take like your fuel report, pull that, and it can say, okay, we average 1,500 miles a week is what or a month. So you can take that, and it'll say you're going to burn this many fuel, this many miles per gallon. And it calculates everything down by month for the total year. And then it divides it all the way into a day, and it says, this is what you have to make a day.
Wow.
Because the thing that I was getting lost on, what James just talked about, is I have a problem, kind of, in the sense of I have 5 different excavators. We have 1 crew, right? So we did have 2, but I've got a 60,000 pound excavator. I got the 32, I got the 28, and I got a 18, and then I got a 15 and the little micro. All of them play a great part. But the part I was trying to capture was, I've got all that equipment, whether I'm working with it or not. So if I'm not billing 40 hours a week on the stone slinger, I still have, in theory, that payment, that cost, that insurance. And that spreadsheet takes your insurance. It takes, like I said, every expense you can add into it. Marketing, we use House Call Pro. It has every single thing in there, and it doesn't allow you to really miss anything. And then that's the part that I was struggling with, is it's like, okay, well, good, we're billing 40 hours of these 5 machines. Well, wait a minute, I've got 12 machines. So how do I compensate for that? So he helped me build that spreadsheet that basically pulls that in to say, this is what you got to make a week, or this is what you got to make a year. And by the way, here's the 8 months that you're going to show a $20,000 a month profit. But here's January, February, where you're going to lose 20 grand a month. Right. So here's your net profit if everything goes as planned. Because you also put in what your sales goal is for each month. And then that automatically manipulates every single number. So
yeah, because you're doing your forecasting in there too, because you can't just say, oh man, we're making 20K a month profit, what should we do with it, when you're not even planning for January, February. So I feel like you're very similar to me, where I am great at following spreadsheets once they're built. And so my wife, Olivia, my wife Olivia is the Excel or Google Sheets master, and so I'm just like, I know what I need, but I don't know how to do it. So I'll have her build it out similar to what you were saying, and then I'm great. Like I can follow it, I can put the numbers in, but that initial build out, if for people listening, that is the biggest part that's probably hanging up most of you is that build out. And so if you just find somebody, they're everywhere, that this is their second language, they can build out what you're looking for. Um, and then all you need to do is just follow it. And I think as entrepreneurs, that's the thing we are good at is trying to stay on top of the business and seeing where we're at.
Yeah, that's where I kept telling him, like, you really should just build a model that you could, like, all these smaller excavators, like I am still, that spreadsheet would be huge. If somebody said, hey, here's a template that's $1,000 and you can basically put every single thing in here, and this is what you can update, you can't update, it's going to populate everything. I would have bought that in a heartbeat, but
Yeah. The tricky part is though, like you mentioned, is the changes and the updates. Like, hey,
yeah.
this no longer applies to where we're at. Can you jump in and change it? So yeah, I think we just need to find somebody that we can recommend through the podcast that can be that recurring source of like help for a
Yeah, if
spreadsheet
there was
in
someone that
that
did that,
example.
Yeah.
that, I mean, that'd be huge, because I don't know how I would really run. You can't run the business without knowing your numbers. I mean, you have to know your numbers. Like that's, it's not just, well, I think I need to make this a day. And I think this is, I mean, when you start out and you got two pieces of equipment and you have your salary and maybe one other, it's pretty easy to figure out. But as you start growing,
Sure.
you really have to understand, how much do I have to make a day, a month, to justify or be able to still make money, but have a new equipment. And that spreadsheet helps you validate whether a new piece of equipment or maybe an old piece of equipment is going to be best. But
Well, and I know I've done a couple presentations, it was the same presentation I've done a couple times now to at the BC and Alberta show, and then did it down at the Nowra Mega Conference in Spokane last month, and it was a lot of this stuff, just knowing your numbers. And I think one of the reasons most businesses, or especially in construction, end up failing is because they just don't take into account the overhead costs
yeah,
and all the indirect costs that go into it. They just go, they take the price of the materials and the time that they're going to spend on there, and then that's it. They don't account for their office staff. They don't account for maintenance necessarily on the bill, maintenance on the machines, maintenance on the vehicles. You know, going to those conferences, paying for like my insurance bill. I don't know. I think I was like 14. No, yeah, it was 14 grand just on business insurance. It didn't include any of my vehicle insurance or anything else like that. So like that's an extra $1,200 a month that I need to account for. But do you ever write that on an estimate, or do you ever put it as a
yeah,
line item in your estimate when it's
yeah,
like, yeah, okay, here's an extra $1,400 for insurance? Like, no, you don't. So,
Yeah.
and
And
that's why I emphasize to people too, like figure out how many hours you're running your machine every year, because just because some book is telling me that I should be charging out my machine at $140 an hour, well, the guy who figured that out is probably turning that thing for 30 to 40 hours a week at minimum,
yeah,
and I'm not. So my cost to run that piece of equipment is going to be higher by the hour. So for me to charge out the same rate as someone else, it doesn't make sense. It's going to end up coming back to bite me in the butt.
yeah, and to be fair on that too, you need to give yourself some grace and help yourself out. So, for example, one thing that I do is I have a budgeting software. So I use PocketSmith. Mint was one I used to love, and then Rocket Money is another great one. QuickBooks, of course, for your main books. But our CFO uses QuickBooks, and then I use PocketSmith. So PocketSmith, it records every transaction for all of our business credit cards, business checking account, you name it. So the reason I like to do that is because we have like our official books, where it says this is how much money you pay taxes on. This is the official number. But to me in my brain, it doesn't make as much sense because, for example, if I have a client that's 3 months behind and then they pay me those 3 months in 1 month, it looks like we crushed it that 1 month. But really,
yeah,
as a
yeah,
business owner, I need to see like you were
yeah,
saying, Travis, you need to see the whole picture. And so what that'll also do is that's also a reactive way to look at things and a proactive way because you can see, okay, in a rolling 90, the rolling quarter, how are we typically looking? And you can start to look and see some trends in your gross profits, your net profits. When are these recurring expenses coming up? But just a way to kind of get on top of it. And the nice thing is that I can't screw anything up because that isn't what we are paying our taxes on. We are paying our taxes on the QuickBooks, which is the official,
Okay, yeah.
of course, documentation. So similar to your spreadsheet, Travis, where that is just something for you to stay on top of the numbers, to stay on top of the costs, so that when you do make a decision, you're well informed. And I would recommend that to anyone, like to
Yeah, I
look
like
at,
that. I haven't heard of that one.
yeah, to look at some type of just budgeting software. And I do it, in the mornings, every single morning, and it takes me 5 minutes just to go through, and that way I stay on top of everything, and I can see in the different categories where we're typically spending, because in our business this year, we went from all contracted work. We had one full-time employee in March to now 9 full-time employees in November here, but we were able to make that transition because we saw our percentage that was going to the contracted work similar to renting and buying,
Yeah.
and said, okay, well, we can afford these salaries, and we'll increase the production rate, and we'll increase the quality. So yeah, let's make that happen.
So you use Pocketsmith, QuickBooks, and then your CFO, he's just he just puts together your profit loss on your QuickBooks.
Yeah. He
Okay.
he he kind of jokes with me that, like, he's like, yeah, your imaginary numbers don't really matter. And I'm like, which they do to me, because then I know exactly, I have the finger on the pulse of our business. But like, as a quick example, um, January and February of this year. January, we showed a loss of like $2,000. And February, we showed a net profit of like $34,000. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. But in my books, it was 16,000 and 17,000, because it was like the end of the month. And so some things got bumped one day
Something
because of the
moved.
weekend. And I'm like, Gabe, I get what you're saying, but for a business owner, I can't look at this and say what happened in January. Nothing happened. It was the
Yes.
way the numbers
Yeah.
worked out. So that's why I like to do that. Just have my finger on the pulse of our finances. But then, like, when it comes to the taxes and the profit and loss statements, he has the official ones that we go through twice a month.
That makes sense. Yep.
So earlier, Travis, you were talking about marketing, and I know one of the reasons that I started following you, or you caught my attention early on, was some of the bright green and black trucks that you had out there. So I'm just curious, as someone else who thinks it's really important to be marketing and branding, why do you spend the money on doing that? Because I know there's a lot of folks out there that think it's not worth it, and it's just a vanity play or whatever. But I know I've seen the benefits and the good side of it. So I'm just curious why you feel that that's worth spending money on.
I think you have to be careful with it, but I definitely think it's worth it on a budget. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, I paid for like the Quad Act. Everything wasn't that way my first year, year and a half, because I had to buy what I could. But then I really wanted to get it to where everything looked the same. And the reason I believe that, we just did it doesn't matter to everybody, but we just did like a $2.5 million house. And the guy was a huge business owner in the trades. He just sold last year. And we were doing his septic for a real estate transaction. He was moving to another house. And just simple things like that, in the sense of we pulled in, I think we had 4 different pieces of equipment there. And he said, came out, he goes, wow, I own 40 different trucks. And I thought we had kind of a nice fleet. But boy, we don't. He said, this looks great. This looks professional. Your guys look great. They're all smiling. Everything's top notch. Like, you guys have just shown up, but I'm so impressed already just by what I'm seeing here. So again, I think clean trucks, matching trucks, good uniforms, everybody wants to do better. Everybody will do better. And that's kind of the image you're coming into a subdivision with or driving through town with it. Everything looks clean, maintained, professional, and usually that carries into your work. And I just personally, I hate it when, it's just a pet peeve of mine, but there's a bunch of them that have, 8 dump trucks and they're all different colors and different styles.
Yep.
And, I understand, like, you can't always just buy Kenworth, or you can't always you buy what you can get, but doesn't mean they can't look the same. I have a hodgepodge of, different truck classes and different things, but, end of the day, from a distance, they all look the same. They're all black and green, and,
Yep.
but I think that's been huge, just from it's kind of a weird, like, respect thing too. But I mean, you drive through, one of my buddies, he's friends, he excavates for me, but he works for 4 different excavators. He kind of gets subbed out. He's like, everybody knew you because of how nice your equipment was. Like when I first started, he just said that like last week. He said, yeah, one of the main reasons people knew you and noticed you was because your trucks were clean, professional, and we're just not used to seeing that.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually had someone not that long ago say to me he didn't want to have any of his company name on the side of his truck because work safe OSHA for you guys. They're driving around, and if they see my truck out front, well, then they'll know that I'm working there. And I thought, well, okay, sure, maybe if you're not worried about what you're doing on the site, that shouldn't be an issue. But I know some people would prefer to not be deckled up or branded out. But I know for myself, I don't do a great job of tracking it. But I know one year I had secured over $250,000 worth of work just because somebody saw Arian's truck drive by, and it was
Yeah,
big enough that they could see the name, so they just called us up.
nice
And
little billboard, and yeah,
well, that's it. I mean, we're
there's a lot of
driving
people
around
that drive up,
anyways.
take a picture, and then they call you. I just saw your truck
100%.
down the road.
Exactly, exactly.
And it's kind of interesting. The job we did last Wednesday, there was it was kind of interesting because I noticed him just as he noticed me, but he's a builder and he
Mm,
had really nice trucks. And I said, "Oh, I've never heard of him. Pretty nice equipment. Everybody looks professional. Trailers very similar to ours." And
yeah,
and he called yesterday and wants me to start digging some homes for him. He's like, I'd like to meet with you, talk with you, see what you're all about. But man, I saw you guys working Wednesday. I saw you guys tear that thing apart. I saw you put it all back together. It looks absolutely amazing. All your equipment looks fantastic. I would like your equipment parked in front of my jobs. I'm like, okay, be
that's
great to meet
awesome.
with
Yeah.
you.
And
But
that's
if everyone
awesome.
else just wants to keep buying those white trucks and not put anything on it, that's fine. Go for it.
Yeah, that is a very common thing right now. Just the white
Yeah.
truck with a little logo on the window or on the side door, but that's it.
Well, I went black because any of the other colors, like black or white, it's always going to be black or it's going to be white. You get into reds or you get into green or any other color, unless you're paying to wrap the whole thing. So I can just get a smaller decal kit, put on my truck for let's call it $1,200
Yeah.
versus if I had to wrap the whole thing, I'm probably going to be into it for about 4 to 5 grand. So I just went black because white doesn't stand out. Everybody has white with a small decal on it, and yeah, it I think it looks sharp. And like I said, you're with your black trucks too. I love it. Looks great.
Well, I have to do a shout out to my mechanic Chuck because the tool truck we bought, I just think a little bit differently. I like to buy stuff and then work it at like 70%. I don't like to work things more than what they're
Yeah,
or at capacity. So I'm not a real big pickup truck guy. I'm more of like we have that Freightliner that's a single axle that can pull a skid steer, and the brakes will last forever, the tires last forever. It's almost cheaper to maintain than a pickup, but you do have to have a CDL driver. But I mean, we
right.
bought that thing for 20 grand out of Florida, and the thing's phenomenal. It keeps all our tools organized and all that. But we went to get that painted, and I think it was like 7 or 8 grand was our quote. And I'm like, oh man, 7, 8 grand. Paid 20 for it.
It's half the price.
I've got half going into and I said it to him, and he's like, you know what? Buy me all the paint stuff. Let me try it. And I'm like, it doesn't need to be like the best paint job in the world, like a professional did it. It needs to look really good. It needs to look good from 10 foot away. do your best. Like it doesn't, I'm not going to go and look at this corner and go, oh, you missed this one little corner. And he's done phenomenal work. He's painted almost everything we've gotten now. Like the Stone Singer was professionally done. The quad was, but he's pretty much painted the rest.
Wow, that's awesome.
And he does a phenomenal job with it. So
that's great.
Man, shout out to Chuck.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned the tool truck, and I gotta give you props because you're the guy who I first saw with a trailer or a truck that was completely organized on the inside that motivated me to get my trailer up to snuff so that we could be a little bit more organized on the job site. Maybe walk me through why why you did that in the first place. I'm sure it has something to do with some of the background and training from your previous work experience. But yeah, tell me a little bit more about why you want everything so organized all the time.
Basically comes down to you have really expensive equipment. Everything comes down to efficiency. I mean, everything. So, I mean, I talked to my guys the last couple of weeks about this. We're doing septics that would normally take crews 2 days. We're doing it in a day, and we're doing it really well. It's not, we're digging a trench and we're throwing the pipe in and we don't care how it's backfilled and we're just digging it. We dig it really, really well. We put it together really, really well, but we can do that because we're never going to the store except for today. But today we had to go get, I was missing, we do these stupid water softener discharge. One county makes you discharge it to outside. So of course, you know, there's one fitting that we didn't have, and we usually carry all the fittings, but the goal is to never go to a store. If you don't have to go to a store, you don't have a guy stopping at the gas station for 20 minutes, getting a snack and getting his drink and then going there and then spending an hour. I can't stand it. It drives me nuts. There's a huge supply house here. And it just blows my mind watching all the plumbers and excavators there stand in line for an hour and a half every morning waiting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, an hour and a half, we could be done with this job. Like there's things that you could, so yeah, organization, everything in a spot. If you have a spot for everything, you're not going to be missing a tool. You're not going to be missing a part. And when you go there, you should be going there to stay, get the job done and leave. And, you know, we've tried the trailer still comes in extremely handy. The tool truck, I've been teasing a little bit, but we had that Tandem Axle International. We're actually putting a box truck on that.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny because, yeah, you got motivated by me, but you did so much better on your design, your design, and that's what we're going to try to put in the tool truck. So like that's actually going to be, and again, the box truck, that's a tandem axle truck that's paid for. You know, we really got rid of our low boy, and we were like, well, we don't really need a fifth wheel, but I really need another tool truck to haul heavier equipment, but have tools on site. I hate going to a place and not having all my stuff. I can't stand it. So when I go there with a dozer, if it's just a dozer job, I want a truck that's got my lasers, my tripods, all the stakes, everything. And then not go drop the dozer, drive back, go get the pickup, drive out there with the pickup with all the stuff, and then drive back. So we're putting a box truck on that. And the reason we're putting a box on it, it's going to have steps that come out both sides and a roll-up door. But I mean, that's going to be done for like 17,000. But if I ordered a metal box, like a dual axle one, that was like 57,000.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need it that bad. I mean, that's right. Had you resend all your measurements and everything, you took my wooden design and you put metal on it, and you did a lot of things that I wish I would have done. Like I built the spec thinking this is probably, I got to get something built, and that was good. But then I like how you took a lot of it and you have different spots where you have each like pipe organized, where I have most of it kind of jammed into a couple of different spots. My trailer is a lot better than my tool truck, but
yeah, our first crack at it was not great. Like it was bad. It wasn't very well thought out. I mean, I bought the trailer. the first time with all the best intentions, but the execution was lacking. So once we made the call to pull everything out and start over, I knew I had to give it a little bit more thought. I think it was still maybe a little bit early on for us to try to get to that point because I just didn't necessarily know what we all needed.
Yeah,
Um, we
that's the
do a
hardest
lot of
part.
pressure. We do so much pressure. I don't like having a 20-foot trailer. I wish I had a shorter one, but that's the lengths that all of our Sked 40 pipe comes in. So I needed to make sure that I had that all set up. So um, yeah, no, it to your point. I think making sure that we don't have guys going out to places to pick stuff up, like it just gets the jobs done faster. You're not losing that time where you could be working on another job or, you know, employees aren't going to like hearing this, but if we can keep overtime down as well, like it adds up. It doesn't mean you don't have to give them overtime, but maybe they can make an overtime on the next job instead of this job.
Yeah.
So yeah, just less time chasing your own tail because you weren't prepared in the first place.
Yeah, and that's kind of the whole headset thing too. Like the
Hmm.
headsets, the reason we do that is, it's that whole ROI piece again. So those new headsets we have are $850 a piece. So, yep, I got about 4 grand, 5 grand into those headsets.
Yep.
5 grand's that's a hard check to write.
It's
But
not nothing.
today is a good example. Josh and I were building the drain field, and Cole and Ethan were digging the line, the 250-foot line from the tank to the drain field. Well, Josh and I are communicating through the skid steer and the safety, and we're not listening to the noise and the squeaks, and we can clearly communicate without having eyesight, without being in sight, without verbal or the cues, the visual cues. So you can just talk and you can whisper and you can say, "Yep, dump a little bit more stone, a little bit more stone," and it's great from a safety standpoint, but the efficiency. You hit a button and Josh and I are on channel. We're still on 5. They went to 6, but now we're 2 crews on one job, not over talking each other. But it's so fast compared to just the, hey, a little deeper, or down and then they overdug. And I mean, again, we're knocking stuff out because when I walk up to the truck, I'm going and getting this one part. But Josh sees me going to the truck and he says, "Hey, when you can, I know you're grabbing that 45. Can you grab a 22 also?" So now
Yeah.
we're not having 2 people walk to the truck to it apart. It's just all simultaneously. We're all just working together and we're all thinking through it and we're all talking through next steps. And that's one of the reasons. So it's kind of silly when you think, oh my gosh, 5 grand. Well, I don't know what you make a job, but let's just say you make 2,500 a job. Well, just 2 more jobs pays for those headsets. Do you
Yep.
think you're going to get 2 more jobs in this year because of the efficiency from the headsets? Yes,
Yeah.
I
Well, I
would
mean,
hope.
when you're saying you're doing one job in a day versus 2 days, like that's huge.
Yeah, so
And
I
and
mean,
I know that
it's
that's
all
probably a
the
huge
little
part of
tiny
it too.
things that they're all huge, and I get very worried about safety. Safety is a huge piece. I have a very young crew, but like, there's never 2 guys in a truck if you're backing. There's always one guy out. Same thing with the headsets. It's awesome. It's like right now, daylight savings time, so it's dark when you're getting to a job site. They're getting ready to back in. You got your headset on. You're like, hey, you're getting close to the mailbox. You're not, in the dark with your
Yeah.
flashlight trying to do a, stop. There's so many aspects that it makes it so safe. And then it's the same thing. Like, you have them on where a guy's backfilling, you're like, hey, don't forget that tree's right there, because he's backing up. There's where it's usually like, oh, I should have reminded you there's the tree right there.
Bet you
Are
would have
you
liked those headsets when you backed into the pool.
What was it?
Or I said those headsets probably would have come in handy when your driver backed into the pool.
Oh
I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
would have been able to talk no problem.
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
it
There's some,
is it the 3M headsets that you're using?
no, we tried those, but we don't
That's
like
hey,
them.
you can say it. What brand are you currently using?
Setcom. We tried 3 different kinds. So I was getting ready to do a YouTube video on it because people ask, but like we did Cena.
Hmm.
Cena, oh gosh, what are they called? Hard Tough Talk, Cena Tough Talk. They were $250 to now they're 350. Those were great. Those were a great, like, are these going to work? Is this really kind of worth buying? And it's like, okay, I got $1,000. I got $1,000 into this. They can't lose with $1,000. And then they would last for about a year, but they were great. Other than they were kind of a nightmare to connect if you had more than like two people. Two people, you'd hold a certain button down, and then you had to wait for it to Bluetooth connect. And they did pretty good. But these new ones, we've tried a bunch of different kinds. These new ones, the negative to them is they do not have Bluetooth, so you can't do a phone call and you can't listen to the radio. But I don't care, because like you literally turn the dial on, says channel 5, and as long as everybody's on channel 5, you're instantly connected.
You can hear them.
There's no pairing, there's no nothing. If you're on 5, you're connected. There's a mute button and one other button that makes it where you change the channel. Other than that, like it's kind of weird. It doesn't do real well around buildings, but it does really well. Like the other day we're doing a septic and I was a mile down the road and I turned it on. I could hear those guys talking as I'm driving down. But it's fun because you can say, hey, I'm pulling down the road now. You guys all out of the way. It's that kind of like communication is absolutely huge. So it's that I'm not pulling up and hopping out of the truck. Hey guys, do you want to move the skid steer? Because I have the load of stone here now. Do you want, communication's absolutely huge. So the more you communicate, the faster everything goes, the safer everything is. It's a big game changer. And again, it's hearing, you're protecting your hearing. You look professional to the customer because you're not yelling, the big part was like when we did concrete tanks, you're holding the tank this way, you have your back to the excavator, and this guy is holding this tank, and you're trying to get the top set onto the lower. You're yelling, and you don't really want to take your hand off because you're trying to hold and put pressure on a certain part to get it. And you could just, you're whispering like, yep, go forward just a little bit, yep, right. And it's just fast. Everything's just smoother. Smooth.
All right, you sold me on it. I'm gonna go get a couple headsets tonight.
Yeah,
and I like these because the other thing was like with the Cena, you couldn't wear hard hats.
Gotcha.
So it was either like you had to buy a hard hat option or you had to buy the muff option. This is designed to where you can throw a regular hat on. So James, you can still wear your hat.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I mean,
perfect.
The all black Canadian Septic hats.
Oh yeah.
I'm liking those.
Yeah. So no snapback though. I know you like the snapbacks on them, but
yeah,
I'm more the fitted hat guy.
Yeah, you got a hat. Well, I gotta get you a hat set.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you got to get the Richardson 112s. But James, I know you're the flex fit snob or the non-snapback.
Yeah, exactly. Not flex fit. That's I can't do flex fits. You gotta get them the right size.
There you go. Yeah.
But
so I know as we were talking before this, you guys are very similar and in how you kind of got into the industry, but we talked a little bit about molding somebody and not having this preconceived notion or this past experience. And so I'd be curious from your guys' perspective, when it comes to hiring people for your team, there's probably not the right answer for this, but in your opinion, is it better to hire somebody that you can mold into the person you kind of want them to be working for your company? Or is it better to hire somebody with that past experience, that 25 years of experience coming in?
James, you want to go first?
I'll let Travis do that because I have only hired 3 people in my life. One's my brother-in-law, and he's still with me, and then we got Tom as well. So I don't have a ton of experience on that, but I'll let Travis answer that one.
I prefer a little bit of experience or no experience in teaching. The one thing I have really struggled, and this isn't, I don't want this to come across as an egotistical way, but luckily I was pretty good. Like I got in and I'm like, and again, it's like, it's you or nothing. Like when I was doing it, it's like, I have to do this because there is no one that's going to come make it better. I have to become good.
Right.
this is my business, this is my life. So it's kind of one of those deals where I had to force myself to figure it out. And I think that's the only challenge is sometimes I've hired a couple guys that, you're kind of like, man, how are you not getting this yet? So it's kind of having the patience, but it's, like it's not an instant for everybody. Yeah. I mean, it's not like everybody's just going to come in and go, oh yeah, I'll start figuring this out. But it's also just trying to find that person with the right mindset. Sadly, I'm that mindset that every single thing I do, every stupid scoop, I'm going, how can I dig that a little bit more efficient? How can I not, how can I not dig in and spin all the way 3/4? How can I spin and do a quarter? How can I not have dirt fall? How can I speed this up a 2-second? Everything. And that comes back again. We talked about it this morning as when you had 100 drivers and they had a $5 mistake, you got $5,000 a day.
Right.
Is that the right math? No, $500.
Yeah, 500.
500.
5,000 is a way better. That proves way more of a point.
But then it was kind of one of, let's just say $5,000 because that's a lot worse.
Yeah.
But when you have a guy making a $5 mistake every day, but you have 10 drivers, but you change that to 100 drivers, or you change that to 5,000 drivers, that $5 mistake is a really big deal. Yeah. So that was kind of back when I went back to training is how do you eliminate the $5 mistake? Because that's a $250,000 a year mistake. So it's kind of a stupid thing here. I had a great guy, but he could not put fittings together to save his life. So he would put it on and it'd be wrong angle and then wrong angle, and then it would be pointing up. He's like, oh shoot, cut that off. And then he would throw that piece away. It's like, well, that's $28. Mm-hmm. Every time you do that, that's $28 in fittings times 5 days a week. You cost me $125, $150 in fittings because you can't figure out the angle right. Like that $150 a week, 52 weeks, we kind of got a big deal. Like, so it's trying to teach them to understand it and how things work. And it's the same thing with equipment running. And it's the same thing with, whether you dump the dirt, 5 yards from the drain field, or if you dump it 100 yards from the drain field, all of that stuff, you're running the equipment further, longer, you're wearing it down, you're taking longer, but more damage to repair. There's more damage to repair to the yard. So, I mean, there's all those different little tiny things that add up, but new I like because you can hire based on the person.
Right.
And if you hire the right person, that's easy to get along with, hard worker, great attitude. I mean, good work ethic. Yeah, I'll take the time to teach them and I told you before, like I hired a guy that had experience and I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Went to the job and, a few weeks later you realize, I don't want this guy working here. He doesn't fit. Like he's just got a bad attitude. And it was harder to fix the bad attitude and what that created in our work environment than it was to deal with him being able to dig all right. And he still wasn't he wasn't a great operator, but he got it done. But it was
right.
It's like, you're not creating this. I want to have fun. I mean, we take it very seriously, but I also want to enjoy it. I want to like the people that I work with, so.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast and UPS has an interesting case study. They are all about efficiencies as well. And I believe they took out all left turns from their GPS navigation. And so they only
all
make these right
turns.
turns. Yeah. And I'm like, man, that is fascinating. And then there's also this thing too, where they made this little key ring for the driver. So when they turn the truck off and they drop the package off, it's connected to their pinky ring or their pinky finger instead of putting it in their pocket. And so they're
not looking for their key.
They jingle around for 3, 4, 5 seconds. And to your point, Travis, it's like, who cares about 5 seconds? But when you have thousands and thousands of drivers that drive every single day, and then you're doing this for years on end, it's like, it's a huge impact. So finding the little things and optimizing them to perfection and then going on to the next one, I think is a huge part of our jobs as the business owner.
Yeah, 100%. All those little tiny things that you're talking about is what helps create a job that we can get done in a day, which then means we're not driving all the way back out there the next day. And it's also, I really hate go backs. And that's what we had kind of with the two crews. They were getting stuff done, but then we'd have to go back because it didn't look quite right, or the dirt would settle more because we didn't pack around the tank, or nothing fundamentally was wrong, but the cosmetic stuff was not done right. So it just didn't look good. It's
it
kind of
costs money to go back and fix every time.
Yeah, and it's safety. It's cost, but then it's like safety. So again, you're not making the money you're supposed to that day for that crew because they're going back to a place we already. But now you got to. Hardly any of our spots are these nice wide open drive right in, and it's so safe, and so you're now unloading a skid steer again. You have the chance to reduce. You have the risk of having more damage to the person's yard, to the truck, to the equipment. It's just stupid time wasting stuff where, again, if you're doing it right, you're unloading the skid steer, you're blowing off the road when you're done, you're cleaning up. But I mean, that was the stuff that was driving me nuts. It's like, oh my gosh, every week we got just one little thing we got to go back. And our motto is pretty much, when we're done, someone shouldn't have to come out and like pick up anything or rake anything. It should be to the standard that once the grass is grown, they can mow it. So, and we always try to kind of keep in mind, like I always try to say, like the grandma, if this was your grandma's house, would you want her to pick up that one chunk of sod that we didn't rake? I mean, so it's like everything looks perfect, and there's like this one stupid chunk of sod. It's like, get rid of the chunk of sod, like pick it up.
Yeah.
A mower's not going to mow over that. Like that's kind of, so that's what's hard is like when I got into this, it was more like, am I a landscaper or am I an excavator? Because we excavate, we get everything done right. But the craziest thing to me is you can put in a $5,000 or $50,000 septic, and most of them really don't care, but they do care if you left that chunk of sod there.
100%.
Right.
So you can do so much good and ruin it with one thing, and it's always right at the end too.
One little thing. So it's like, make sure we do it. We kind of have that now where, when you're done, one guy goes up, knocks on the door. Hey, want to do a quick walkthrough? We got all the equipment not loaded yet. We don't have the equipment loaded yet. So you don't feel awkward to say, yeah, I don't really like that, because now I know you'd have to unload the equipment. So you go there before everything's done and say, okay, is this to your satisfaction? Is there anything that you don't like? Is there anything that you want us to change? It's not a big deal. Is there anything that you, and sadly, some of that emotional intelligence stuff that you got to try to teach, in the sense of people will still say, no, it looks good, but they'll be looking at that rock.
Yeah.
So that they're not going to tell you that there's something wrong, but you now look, you follow their eyes and you see what they grab, and then you just go fix it.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to tell you that something's wrong. Most people don't want to say bad about anybody or anything. So, but the bad thing is like the person that's home is always the super nice person. And then the spouse that's coming home is the one that comes home and goes, what's that stupid rock doing in the yard? And they're the ones that come and then like leave the review, or they're the ones
1-star Google review.
Stuff. So it's just trying to, really look at the little details and make sure everything's perfect when you leave.
Yeah. And Travis, I would say on that too, if you are an excavation and a septic company and the details you're going to adds on 2 more days, that's a different conversation, because you just can't, it's much harder to be competitive with your pricing. However, you're showing that you're going from 2 days to 1 day, and also doing that because you're working on all these other efficiencies. So I think that's a big piece of it as well. It's not like, because there's also a conversation too where you do have to be careful as an excavation company. Let's say you're digging a pond, it might not be perfect, and like you got to be careful with like how, like what are the expectations of the client, and are they just going to keep calling you back? And so I think that final job walkthrough is perfect before you load everything up, because then it's like, hey, we're here. And then usually that's where you'd ask for the Google review. Is everything look good? Are we good to load up? Yep, yep, yep. And then also any final pieces of education. In the septic world, you guys are public health professionals. You guys are educating your clients on how this stuff works. And I'm sure both you and James, a lot of your clients, like they don't know where their tank is, or they don't know how it all
Yeah.
works. And as far as the maintenance schedule and everything. So, I mean, that's a huge part of your marketing as well, is making them feel heard and also educating them on the whole process.
Yeah. I love it when they're, you know, it's kind of funny because you get some guys that are like, oh my gosh, these people are out here watching me. Like, do they feel like we're really gonna? And it's like, no, you got to remember, there's two things. A lot of times they've never seen it.
Yeah.
Another thing is they might want to be in your shoes, and they're wanting to run the machine, and they're
Yeah.
loving every aspect of it. They may have a scowl on their face, but they're just watching. You know, and then and then that's where you take the opportunity to say, what questions do you have? Can I show you how this whole thing works? And this is how, like, I very pointed on the risers and the effluent filter and the clean out, you know, because we add a clean out no matter what, because Murphy's Law is something's going to back up, never backs up, but it's going to back up after you do a septic. And they're going to instantly think, which anybody would, my backup's because you put in the new septic. And we add a clean out, and we do a specific, and I was going to do a video on this too, but we do a T because you can open it and you can see if there's sewage in it.
Yeah.
So if a customer calls us 2 days or a week or a month after and says, hey, I got sewage backing up in my bathroom, I think something's wrong with the tank, we will say, do me a favor, walk out, open your clean out cap, which I showed you, open that up. And if you see sewage in there, we'll be out there right away. If there is not sewage in there, then it's not our issue, because we did everything from the clean out down.
Right.
So if there's not sewage in it, sadly, it's somewhere else in the house, but I'm saving you a service call and everything else, you know,
Yep.
from an aspect of they can go troubleshoot that themselves. And there's plumbing code and all that where they want the right, you know, the angles going in, so the jetter, but the problem with those is you can't see. So then you're either digging up a lid and you're digging up all the stuff and you're trying to troubleshoot to find out, oh, we didn't have to do any of this because it's not actually out here. So
Plus, you get the added benefit that when you do have to jet something, they're not jetting from inside the house; it's inside the
Yes.
house, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
keeps things a little bit cleaner in there. And yeah, I agree 100%. The T's are great. You can even kick the hose both directions too with a T versus
Yep.
the 45s, or doubling them up and having them go back towards each other. But yeah, no, that's big. That's a great way to get customers to, yeah, check whenever there's a backup. Because I know for us, more times than not, it's either a float's got stuck or pumps kicked off, or there's actually 99% of the time there's a leaking toilet in the house. So
Yeah,
to your
that's a
point, that
lot.
T, like, crack that lid open, look in. Like, if you got water running on a steady basis, well, you've got a running toilet. And so that's why we love our transducers and control panels that can actually tell us where or when that water is coming in, what the levels are at, because I can see at 10 p.m. The water level started to accumulate. Well, what time did you go to bed? 10 o'clock? Cool. Did you go to the bathroom before you went to bed? Uh-huh. Okay, your toilet's leaking in your master ensuite, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's troubleshooting is a whole nother thing. But yeah, anytime you can eliminate a trip out there to go look at something, and then you feel bad almost having to charge them for coming to look at it, and that's never a happy thing for them either. But yeah, to be able to prevent that's huge.
And I think the other thing I forgot to mention though is Len does the estimates, and he does a really good job of, and it gets exhausting, you know, repeating the same thing over and over. But it's like, okay, do you understand that we're bringing a 30,000 pound excavator in, like a tank replacement? Do you
Yeah.
understand? And because people will go, well, I know the tank's only 8 foot by 4 foot and 8 foot, so it's really just this spot. And it's like, no, we will destroy a 60 or 70 foot by 70 foot because we have to dig the dirt, we have to place the dirt, we have to get in here in machines. He does a really good job of setting kind of what's to expect.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, you know, kind of back to the marketing thing a little bit, is that's where our Instagram and our Facebook and stuff is huge, because, and we're working this winter on creating a lot more videos of how do you clean your effluent filter? How do you check this? How do you, so, and then like, oh, you have a tank replacement that you're going to be doing with us. Come along, let's see what this looks like. So they can say, I got a tank replacement. Len can say, well, actually, Len's retiring next year. So I'm working through that right now because I'm going to probably go back into estimating. But one of my main goals as a business owner is to make it that if I die tomorrow, the business could really still run. So if I'm doing all the estimates, that's a pretty big piece. Like right now, I mean, I could die on the way home and this business would run perfectly without me. I mean, Len does all the estimates. Lisa knows how to handle everything. The guys know how to do the work. You know, if somebody wanted to buy it or if they took it over, it would run. I mean, I wouldn't be missed. You know, I do the marketing stuff and I mean, I do stuff, but so that's the only part that makes me a little bit nervous is I might be looking for an estimator, but I did the estimating, Len took over, and then I'm looking at taking that back, but I would like to kind of dial in. Estimates is a huge piece, you know.
Like it is.
It's if you're off a little bit. That was, I think, wet conference when I first started. I don't remember who it was. But he did a presentation and it wasn't the book, but it was something like profit first. But he did a phenomenal job of just drilling in. Like,
so this one, Travis, profit first for contractors.
I don't think it was.
No, Van Dyke.
He's got it dialed in, ready to go.
That
was perfect.
Because that book is really good, but I don't think he was the same presenter. Because he basically just did the really simple math of like, okay, I can't tell you the price, but I charge $1,000 for this job. This guy charges $200 for this job. Well, this guy's booked for 6 months. I've got 2 weeks worth of work, but I make $5,000 a week. He makes $1,000 a week. His guys are busy. His equipment's run down. Well, lack of quality, all that kind of stuff. He's like, end of the day, I make this at the year, and he makes this at the year, and he's exhausted, and he goes, and I got 5 stars. I do quality work. I show up when I'm supposed to. And he basically drilled that in of you've got to be priced to where you can continue that high quality, but they're also paying for that high quality and what you're providing. So
people are willing to spend more money for higher quality. And that's something some people have a hard time understanding because they would never do it themselves. But there are people out there that are willing to spend more money to do business with Travis versus whoever the other guy is down the road, because he knows that Travis is going to do what he says he's going to do, and that's one of the biggest challenges with homeowners that I know. For us, we primarily deal with homeowners. We've done a couple commercial projects of late, but primarily it's with homeowners, and they don't know who you are. All they know is what they see, what they can find online and whatever the reviews are. So
well, that's the big, so not to give away, because I don't think anyone near me listens too much, but but the catch is one of our marketing strategies, if you want to call it that, is we'll usually say, are you getting any other estimates? And one of the other things we'll always say is, oh, good. It's good that you're checking. That's fine. But if you have questions on any of our quality, we post every single job we do every single day. So what you're having us quote, we did 3 of those last week. Go look at what it looked like at the beginning, during, and at the end, and then just go check our competitors, because I'm sure they're just as proud of the work that they do.
Tongue planted firmly in cheek.
And there isn't. So it's just one of those deals where some of them still have websites that have the date, back when you take a picture and it had the date on it. Some still.
Luke doesn't know about this. No.
It drives me bananas.
This book is great. I just read that again. I was going to have it here for one of my 3 books, but it's down.
But this one?
Oh,
yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I got your back.
Look at that young guy.
Oh yeah. Love it.
You guys are too good. So that actually is a perfect segue, because obviously, Travis, we got to hear from you. You were even saying earlier in the podcast, you love books. You're doing this weekly book study with your team. So 2 questions. I want to hear more about the weekly book study, and I know everyone else does as well. But then what book recommendations do you have for all the dirtbags listening?
the book study's been great because the extreme accountability or the extreme ownership, that's actually been a great book, because that's kind of what we were missing a little bit. The one thing I have not done a good job on is I don't have a team lead yet. So everybody's the leader, and and not everybody grasped that at first, but that's kind of one of those deals where, you know, we've changed a little bit now, where like whoever says I'm on my way starts the app, sends the notification saying I'm heading to your job. They're the ones in charge of putting all the pictures on the job, putting all the notes in, communicating with the customer, hitting finish, dialing everything in. They're in charge of it. Where again, it's kind of that's the part where the ownership piece I think was missing, where guys would get back and it's like, well, did you grab the parts, or did you charge the batteries? Did you take the trash out of the truck? There wasn't the ownership. So now, and again, extreme ownership is really, if you're not doing it, you're supposed to make sure someone's doing it. Like, that's just the communication piece again. But, the two books, this one I never hear anybody talk about, which I think is, so I'm going to go with simple first, but I don't know if you see it, Creating a Competitive Advantage. Nobody ever talks about
Oh, there we go. Creating competitive.
It's really hard to find. It's almost impossible to find. It is literally the best book you will ever read in your life if you want to figure out what your competitive advantage is, because everybody says, all three of us show up at a job. We all say, I've got the best excavators.
Yeah.
I've got the best people. I've got the best truck. We have the most knowledge. Every single person says it. So this really makes you dial in. I read this every year. I've got it all highlighted. It's brown because I've read it so many different times. I mean, it's just, it's got so many different aspects of truly dialing in. I mean, there's so many, like, there are so many things highlighted and double underlined, and, like how you measure, like what your mission should be, the measurement, because that's what the cultural, I mean, there's so many aspects that makes you think. And I bought this when I worked at the other company, and all the stuff I used to brag about, I'm like, wow, that's right. All the drivers are good. That's right. All the trucks are new. Like, wow, really, what is our competitive advantage? And then you start really digging into it, and that's where you really start dialing some different things. But this one's really good in the sense of, if you're trying to go to your customers and you're trying to explain why we're better, it gets you into the really good detail of, the quality of the pipe we use, the clean outs that we add, the risers to grade, a 6-inch influent filter, even when it's not required. I mean, there's all these different aspects of, we bring in topsoil, we Harley rake, we do this, there's all these different pieces. We have a software, so when you accept a quote, when you're scheduled, and we're going to hit that week, and 2 days before, you're going to get a notification again saying that we're coming, and you're going to get a phone call saying that we're coming. And here's all the aspects that you'll truly love working with us that the competitors don't have. But it helps you dial all that stuff in. It really challenges you.
Who's the author on that one, the Creating Competitive Advantage?
Janie L. Smith.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Jaynie.
Awesome.
Because I read this and then I lost my one copy, and it was impossible to find. I mean, I finally found one. I bought a used one.
Hey, Luke, we better go look before this episode publishes, eh?
Oh yeah, no, we're gonna buy them up, and then I'm
We'll
just
get
gonna
the last two.
I'm gonna mark them up and sell them. So
Jeffrey J. Fox, Great Boss, How to Be a Great Boss. Jeffrey J. Fox is, if you're not a book reader, he is literally the best author in the world, because all of his chapters are
pictures.
No pictures. I love pictures.
Shoot.
But they're only usually a page and a half.
No kidding.
If you're not good at reading books and you don't like it, this is the one that you have at your nightstand, and you can read one page, and the one page is to the point. It's just like A plus A equals A, only higher A's, and it's just very, very quick. This one I love because, like, if you hire a C player, the most anyone will ever approve is a letter, like one grade.
Yep.
So like if you hire a C, the best he'll ever be or she will ever be is a B. So, you got to really start with a high grade. It's kind of just very, very simple. He's got like 4 books. They're all fantastic. And then the only other one I forgot, which they're all, if you notice, they're very small. So like if you
That's
don't like
good.
reading, starting out, avoid the Simon Sinek's and some of those that are really theory and thought and very provocative. They really get you to think. If you're just starting out, these are literally the best because they're so simple, they're so fun, they're easy, and they're so to the point. And then the other one was the very first book I ever read. Sadly, I was not a scholar in school. I read one book in school, and then leader at the company when I was a driver, he saw something in me and he bought me this book and wrote a nice little letter in there saying, there's some pretty good future here ahead of you. And he said, here's your book. And I'm like, I don't read books. He's like, read the book, so, but it was very similar. It's a John Maxwell book. It's the 21 indispensable laws of leader, or 21 characteristics of a leader. And exact same thing. It's like a page and a half of just talking about the character, and then it gives like a page and a half of a story, and then like bullet points to think through. And it's
a devotional for business people or devotional for leaders.
Yeah, they're all good. I mean, so the thing I like is if you're not a reader, which a lot of people aren't, and you don't have a lot of time, those are phenomenal books because they're very short, they're very simple, and you don't need to be this big scholar thinking through how you're going to be this phenomenal leader. It can be this How to Be a Great Boss has, I think, like 60 different points of just simple little tiny things you can do to be a great boss.
Yeah. And one thing that's helped me is my wife, Olivia, and I did 75 hard this year, and you read 10 pages a day. And I was like, man, I was like cruising through books, and I'm not a reader as well. And so I just we kept that going. And so I still do just 10 pages a day. And it's amazing how much you can get through when you just have the consistency, but also how much you can learn. And as people are talking about different leadership books or self-help books or business books, I can now relate to them because I'm like, I actually read that and I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's so cool. So, and it ties into the book we've talked about before, Atomic Habits, like these small, little, minute, positive habits done over a long period of time, as James is looking for.
It's not here. It's upstairs.
And
I do have that one too.
Yeah. But then also on the flip side, the small negative habits done over a long period of time will then drag you down. So I love that. That's why we started bringing it up here on the Dirtbags podcast, because I didn't realize how many people actually enjoyed that piece when we started bringing up book recommendations. And I could see in the future, like us doing some type of like Dirtbags book club where we all pick a book. For example, we all read one book, and then each week on like Instagram or something, we go through the chapters or something like
right. Yeah. I mean, it's
that'd
good
be
stuff.
so cool.
It's like, Headway app. I don't know if you ever heard of that. So back when I was big into leadership a lot, I would read pretty much a book a week. And then back before podcasts and these smartphones, I'd used to buy these executive book summaries. So it was like every month they would send you 3 books that were there was a CD that you would put in your computer that would like have information on it. And then it'd be like an 8-page summary. So it'd take a book and it would summarize the book for you in 8 pages. So, you could really get 3 books done very quickly without having to read the whole book. Headway is the exact same thing. And I think it's like, I don't remember what the price. It's very, very cheap, but it's unlimited books. And they basically break it down into 15 minutes. So what's kind of cool is like, I like having you pick the books, like the people pick the books, because that is also the other thing is like, I don't want to go buy a book for $20 and a chapter in, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the worst book ever. The Headway thing I do like, because like the Atomic Habits was on that. And I'm like, that's really good. I could dig into that a little bit deeper, but it gives you a real quick snapshot of whether you think that'd be a good book or not. And then you can go buy it to actually get further into it.
That's perfect. I love it because we've done that in one of my men's Bible studies. It was like a book club as well, and we had one book. We were 7, 8 chapters in. We're like, does anyone else think this book sucks? And like, it was just not good at all, and we committed weeks to it. And so I think I'm gonna implement that as doing something with Headway, something with the Dirtbags community, because they've really enjoyed hearing the recommendations from guests as yourself, Travis, and just like, what are you learning to further, grow your business? So I definitely think we're onto something there, and it's something
I
that's
would
a
also
little,
like to know what podcasts people listen to. Like I
yeah,
Yeah.
obviously love your guys's, and I love the dirt piece, and I love hearing other owners and what they experience. And but like Entree Leadership was always a good one, and
yeah,
then you know MF CEO, I forget what he's called now, but there's a bunch of good ones that it's amazing how much leadership's out there for free.
yeah,
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
not like you have to be this big investor and buy books and do. I mean, if you don't have time to read, at least start listening to podcasts when you're running a skid steer. You know,
yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah.
time.
And ideally, we could start introducing some more of those through our podcast, because I think a lot of listeners find us first, and it's like they're looking for that next, more professional podcast. And I listen to Entree Leadership every day, and Andy Frisella, and it's like, okay, how can we filter those to our guests that are already listening, and maybe also like help them with like, this is the Cliff Notes version of what you're going to learn typically through those podcasts. And if you're looking for this, go to this podcast, and just kind of
Yeah,
help with that.
yeah. Because there's a lot of good ones, but there's a lot that you're like, well, that's not what I thought. And then you're
Yeah,
trying to
that ain't
find
it.
another one, and it's kind of Andy Stanley's a really good Christian. He's down in Atlanta area, but he's a he's a pastor. But Craig Rochelle, but they're
Yep.
phenomenal leaders. I mean, just yes, they're great pastors and stuff, but they are phenomenal leaders if you're looking for like the Christian path. That's
Yeah.
but,
Yeah,
yeah, they're really good.
absolutely. So yeah, Travis, as we are wrapping up here, for one, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show. This is I as jam-packed as I expected it to be, but also I know that in the near future we're going to need to do another episode, just because there's so much more, even just on leadership, as we're starting just to scratch the surface on that. There's so much more we want to dive into. And then James, of course, thank you for being
Oh,
on,
my
guest
pleasure.
host of the year.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, shoot. Let's see if we can hold out for no more guest hosts for the rest of the year, and then I can wait for my award to show up here.
oh no, but you guys, I appreciate it a ton. Travis, thank you
Yeah.
again. Excited to see you. So, oh, one last thing, for people listening. So we will be at the MSTA, the Michigan Septic Trade Association, new name.
Yeah.
That's in February. I'll be speaking there, and James, I believe you'll be there as well.
I think that's the plan right now. You bet.
And then Travis, you'll be there. And then the wet show, if I remember right, it's like the next week.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the
I think it's
Michigan one's
fine.
middle of the week, and then the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think is Indy.
Okay, perfect. Because we'll be out speaking in India as well, and we had talked about it before, but still planning on doing big Airbnb, get a bunch of septic um, business owners together. Like, since we're already out at the show anyway, might as well have like a place to stay at, mastermind session like after the show, all that kind of stuff. So very informal, but yeah, excited to get that going, and just excited once you get past the holidays. I feel like it's trade show season, and
Yeah.
I
Oh
love
yeah.
it because you get to see everyone in person again. So, and we'll put out more updates on the Dirtbags podcast as we get closer. But um, to my knowledge, MSTA is open if anyone wants to come check it out. And then also, the wet show, of course, is open to anyone who wants to come check it out. So that'll be my first time at the wet show, and I've heard great things about
Oh,
it.
it is. Yeah, the
Yeah,
wet
I'm
show's good.
excited.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw you. I think the first time I met you was at Con Expo.
Yep, Con
Yeah.
Expo, and yeah, that's gonna come right up 2026. Where they already did a call for presentations, and so I'm working on that, and which is crazy because I mean it's gonna come fast. So that is, I believe, March 2026, and we're just gonna get the whole gang back together.
That'd be
Yeah,
cool.
be a good time. I know that's when Travis and I think first met in person too. Sitting outside the in the hall waiting to get into
Yeah.
your class. We were chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
Learned some
Man.
stuff from this Luke guy.
Learned nothing. Oh man, I love it. Well, hey you guys, I appreciate everything. Thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Excited to see you guys coming up in February. And James, we got Seattle Seahawks, Minnesota Vikings in Seattle. I will
That's
see you in a little
happening.
bit. So
Sounds good. We'll see you next month.
All right. Thanks,
all right,
guys.
boys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again, guys.
Yeah.